Hey guys, welcome back to the Digital Sniper. And before I go on with today's topic, let's go over some of the cards that came in the mail. Three packages came in the mail. Let's start with the singles, raw singles, and let's see what I got. Ooh, very tight packaging here. Might need to do a extra slit. It's good that they secured the packages very tightly. With cardboard sandwich, which I always prefer, especially with singles, even though they may or may not have these cards in the top loader. Ooh, it's really tight. Now, I do prefer the cards shipped in the top loader because honestly, I think, if they're more like base commons of other sorts, I think I can accept it not being in top loader, but for the shield, I would prefer these cards to be in the top loader. Okay. Are they in top loader? Yeah, they seem to be in the top loader. Okay. All right. So let's see what we got here. So we got an Alan Trammell, Jack Morse, Jim Abbott, my second Jim Abbott, and Eric Davis. All right, let's take a closer look at the card. Now, once again, when I'm buying raw, I'm not expecting these to grade, come back with high grades, but this looks pretty good. Good eye appeal. Of course, there's still, I need to check the surface of the card, but overall, a good eye appeal is what I'm looking for, and this seems to be in really good shape. All right, set this aside for now. Let's have a look at the Abbott. Okay, slightly soft in the corner here, and there's a slight ding in the corner here. But as expected, these weren't that expensive. And the Jim Abbott's actually very hard to get well centered. So yeah, once again, there's also other issues that I may need to look at later, including the surface and so forth. But overall, good idea. All right. And Jack Morse. Now, this is my first Jack Morse. I still need to find a graded Jack Morse and maybe a PSA, preferably a PSA 9 or 10, to complete my Hall of Fame run. Now, this is slightly off center in the back, and has a slight ding in the bottom right corner. But overall, I think acceptable. Centering is not perfect. As you can see, it's slightly off center to the right and slightly. No, it's top down. It's quite okay, but overall acceptable for the price I paid. And let's have a look at the Alan Trammell. Once again, a slight soft corner at bottom. Yeah, and borders look pretty good. Centering is not bad. Back centering is not bad. Once again, acceptable for a raw card. Okay, so I bought two Nolan Ryans. Okay, so I don't know which one's the graded one and which one's the raw. This seems like it's the raw one. So let's go with the raw one first. Here's the first time I got a card in one of these cases. Now let's have a look at the back centering since it's already exposed. The back center is pretty good for this card. I don't know. I have a feeling when I looked at this card on the listing, I have a feeling this card may be gradable. And I don't say that much with a lot of my raw cards because usually, you know, there's a reason why, as I mentioned before, there's a reason why these cards are raw. And obviously the seller knows. But, okay, I might need a blade for this. Yeah, but I have a feeling this is actually a very good copy. Wow, it's odd that someone would use tape like this. Wow, okay, super sticky. All right, let's have a look at the card. Shield looks pretty good. Okay, there's slightly soft corner on the right, but overall, I think, you know, this would grade well, like maybe PSA 8 or higher. These aren't stains, by the way, it's just the residue from the tape. But overall, this is a pretty good looking card. I wouldn't say PSA 10. You know, the centering is not perfect, and I think with the recent PSA guidelines, this, you know, grading guidelines, this may not go for a 10, probably like a 9 at most. But I'm trying to see if there's any surface issues through the case, which is pretty hard to spot. But I don't know. I need to open this up, and there's still another layer of tape of this, but overall it looks pretty good. Let's see if I can. Would love to see if there's any surface issues. Usually, it's the surface issues that discourage the sellers from grading them. I'll gotta be super careful, super tight. Guys, don't use tape like this. This is dangerous stuff. Wow. Okay. Let's have a look here. Let's see if I can just crack this open. I'm anxious to see the surface here. Okay, I do see some very, very minor surface issues there. Okay, and a slight imprint here, so that's probably why. I'm not sure if I don't think I'll grade this. I think that this will come out to be like one of those cards where extremely, extremely high eye appeal, but the card will grade like a 5 or 6 due to the slight imprints I'm seeing now. So that's a shame, but and I didn't. This wasn't cheap neither, but overall, I'm happy to get a copy of this in such high eye appeal. Once again, the record breaker Nolan Ryan's, they're hard to get well centered. And while this centering on this isn't perfect, right, as you can see, it's slightly off center to the right and slightly top, but overall, I'm quite happy with how the card looks. So I'm just going to keep this raw. And let's have a look at my last card here. Okay. This one is coming in one of those PSA authentication, eBay authentication cases, I should say. I forget how you open this. I think there's this little slit here. Yeah. I hope that's not it. Where's the card? Okay, yeah, it's beneath the cardboard. I have heard of cases where people got a box like this and there's no card inside. So, all right. So recently came across this older label, PSA 9. Of course, Nolan Ryan record breaker, but let's have a look at the card closely. Looks pretty good. Definitely no surface issues on this. There's a bit of a scuff on the case, but that's okay. Something we can probably polish out. The corners look pretty good. I'm very surprised, just looking at this now, how this did not get a 10, especially with an old label. I don't see any issues with it. Yeah. Anyways, so this is one of those, like I was saying, this is a very hard card to get. Well centered. There's quite a few of them, and that's actually quite expected since it's a Nolan Ryan. But yeah, happy to add this to my PC. Now, this card here completes my record breaker run, and which is what I want to talk about, and that is like how I collect Topps Shield. And it's a very big set and can be very, very overwhelming. Now, if your strategy is just to go at the set and get whatever cards you can get at a high grade, you can do that. However, it can be very overwhelming in terms of whether it's the financial costs or the fact that you're always, eyeing on listings, whether it's eBay or Fanatics or wherever. And it can be very tiring. It could be like a job, basically. 792 cards, whether you're collecting raw or graded, is not a small set at all. And I know people will say, well, there's other sets with similar numbers, but I think the thing is, one thing that makes this particularly hard is that it's so very limited in terms of numbers, right? So, and also a lot of these cards, I do think that a lot of these cards, although the original print run was in the 8,000s, but a lot of these cards don't exist. I believe that back in the day when a lot of the troops got the cards like we do now, they probably just took out the stars and threw out a lot of the base commons. So I actually think that, first of all, a lot of the base commons and high grades especially, they may have a lot of value in the future, but that's a topic for another day. Now I want to talk about how I focus my collection. And when I first started, I kind of aimed at these sort of like subsets that I created. And obviously, I started with what I considered to be easier. And some of them ended up to be a lot harder, especially if you're collecting them now. I started with my first so-called subset that I started was the checklists. Because back when I started, the checklists weren't that expensive. You could find checklists for like in PSA 10 for less than $100. Good luck finding that now. Okay, I think like an average checklist of PSA 10 now costs like roughly 200 to 300 if you're lucky. But so I completed that very quickly, and that obviously what got checked out of my own personal collection checklist. And then secondly, I aimed at the All Stars. Okay, so which is the Alan Trammell card here. You can see one of the cards is the Alan Trammell. Now, in a previous video, I mentioned how I completed the All Star run, but actually, I was wrong. I was still missing one card, and I'll talk about that in another video. But so I'm not quite done with the All Star run. I still need one more card, and in theory, I could finish it, but I'm trying to look for a PSA 10. So you know, once I get that All Star run completed, I'll make another video about that. But so the while I was collecting the All Star run, I was also collecting the Record Breaker run. So with this card here, I finally completed the Record Breaker run. The Record Breaker run I consider to be harder to collect. Okay, and I think both the All Stars and Record Breakers have cards that are not easy to find, especially if you're looking for a high PSA grade. Okay, so you know, obviously the with the stars, it's easier to find Desert Shield in high grades. Okay, because obviously there's more people grading them, there's more people flipping them. Unlike, you know, the so-called base commons or even cards like the Jim Abbott, which I talked about in another video, where finding a PSA 10 wasn't that easy. Okay, so in the Record Breaker set, I think one card that I kind of I'm not giving up, but at the moment I'm happy to stay mid grade was the Cal Ripken Jr. Record Breaker, which I think everyone knows. I think there's no tens, so to find a nine, it's pretty hard. I haven't seen a nine in recent months, and previously I bought a really good Eye Appeal 7. So I don't want to buy an 8 because that's like an in-betweener, but I think I'll go for a 9 eventually and upgrade the 7. However, at the moment, that's like the only Record Breaker that I have. Oh, sorry, no, correction. One of the twos. The other is the Ryan Sandberg. Now, the Ryan Sandberg PSA 9 isn't that hard to find, especially recently because Ryan Sandberg had passed, and I think a lot of people are selling his cards. But I haven't gone to upgrade his PSA 7 to a 9 yet. But I think eventually I will. Okay, so, but anyways, this was the hardest card, I think, in the Record Breaker run for me, the Nolan Ryan. That, not that because they weren't available, but because the prices for these cards are, some of them are marked quite high, okay, to a point where you know, I personally feel that it's a bit overpriced. So I was able to pick this up for a pretty good deal. I think reasonable price, I should say. I wouldn't call it a deal, but it's a reasonable price from comps. And so, you know, I decided to go for it. Now, are there any other cards that in Record Breaker run I think it's hard to find? Well, there are certain things like for example, the Cal Ripken, right? I mentioned before how a lot of the cards have a roller mark, and I haven't seen a 9 pop up yet. So I'm questioning whether or not the 9s, and the reason why there's no 10s is because a majority of these cards have that roller mark, and the higher grades are cards without the roller mark. So if anyone knows, please let me know. I'd be really happy to know. But I haven't seen the 9 yet, so I can't make, you know, any comparisons between the mid or lower grades compared to the higher grades. Now with the All Stars, are there any that are really hard to find PSA 10s? Well, yeah, there's a couple. There's I think the Griffeys are definitely the Griffey, I should say. Sorry, the Griffey is kind of hard to find in PSA 10. And if you do, they probably sell for a big premium. and some of the lower, I mean, the non-stars. Okay, I should say. Like for example, like the Bob Welch at the PSA 10 is pretty hard to find. Cards like that are probably just, you're better off just going for a PSA 9. I've mentioned this before. There's certain cards that, if they have really high eye appeal, but you also have to look at how the market looks at these cards as well. Like, are they in high demand? If they're not, are you going to spend the big, are you going to pay the high price tag for the PSA 10, knowing that it won't sell that easily? Okay, so I'd rather have like a 9 and a couple nice looking eye appeal raw than a 10. But that's just the way I collect. Um, and like, some people will only chase for a 10s, but I think, as I mentioned in previous videos, the a lot of the older labels, and even with the newer labels, there are some cards that don't deserve a 10. And the more I see these cards on eBay or on other listings, um, the more I tell myself, it's okay to buy a 9. Okay, as long as the cards look good. And for me, it's really 90% is centering. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe 80% is centering, and then like 20% is the rest, like the corners and I expect for a 9 that you shouldn't be facing things like surface issues and stains and so forth. But I think that majority of 9s are very PSA 10 worthy. Okay, considering that a lot of the 10s may not be PSA 10 worthy. So yeah, so basically that's the other two. I'm still considering, like, my next run will be probably like either the Rookie Cup or the Rookies. Um, and what else? Or maybe the Managers. So basically, the reason why I do this is because, like I said, it's a big set and can get very, very overwhelming. And so when you focus on a so-called subset, right? They're not officially subsets, but when you kind of like isolate certain cards that you want to collect, it gives you more time to do other things. Okay, because otherwise you're like constantly looking at cards 24/7. And although I wouldn't mind doing that, but in reality, that's just very time consuming. So yeah, what subset, so-called subset, would you advise me to take on next? I mean, I'm also always working on the Hall of Famer run, which I haven't completed, but I have a good number of cards. There's a few cards that I'm eyeing on right now that's on eBay. I maybe one day or in the next video, I'll update everyone on how many of the cards in the Hall of Famer run that I now own. But anyways, so yeah, should I start on the rookie subset, the managers? I'm trying to think of anything else. Some people do teams. Yeah, teams may be a good way to complete your cards in a very systematic step-by-step process, especially if you're like me, where you have accumulated quite a few cards already, because it makes the teams, or consolidating these team cards a lot easier, right? Because you already have a lot of them. So yeah, but I've noticed that there's certain teams that I, in my checklist of in my for my personal PC, where I don't have a lot of cards. I think it's either Texas or Milwaukee, but not that it was intentional. It's just that, for somehow, like, I don't have, at least for the '90s, I don't have a team that I prefer per se. But anyways, so I just want to share that's how I collect, and it's been working for me, because I think that one thing that really makes me, encourages me to continue on with this set is not only that, by creating these subsets, and whenever every time you complete a subset like this record breaker, it makes you feel really good, it also prolongs this hobby for me, because I'm the only set that I'm collecting right now is the Desert Shield. And quite frankly, I don't want to complete the set that soon. I'm hoping that, I'm collecting these cards once I retire and when I have more time to do so. So yeah, so I don't mind taking this very slowly, and also by taking it slowly, you can also ensure that you're sourcing like better looking cards. Don't get FOMO and just buy whatever you can get. Like there's a few Jim Abbott's on eBay, not a lot by the way, but even raw, there's not a lot, but there's a lot of them that don't look pretty good too, like edges cracked and dinged corners and so forth, and really off centered. But you know, I want to make sure that regardless of whether or not I would resell one day, or that I would hand these cards off to someone that I know, I just want to. Oh, I just want the next person to look at these cards and say, "Wow, they're in really good shape," regardless of the grade. So that's all I want to talk about today. Obviously, I need to re-top loader some of these cards, and for this, I may even put in one of my nice magnetic one touches. Yeah, which I'll talk about another time too. There's a particular brand of one touches, and it's not Ultra Pro, obviously, that I really, really love. And when I come across a card that I really like, I will put these cards into these one touches. So that's all for today. Just want to show you recent pickups and talk about how I collect. Please like and subscribe this video, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye now.